Welcome, everyone, to a forum on the law school experience. I am really excited today to be joined by Brandon Miller, Kameron Adams, and Zach Nemirovksy. The three individuals that you have here today are individuals who have come from multiple walks of life, who have different undergraduate backgrounds, and who are at different stages in the law school experience. Each of them are going to give you a pretty succinct window into their experience, where they've come from, what they're doing right now, and where they're going. And I hope that through the course of this video, it will answer a lot of the more personal questions that you might have about law school, and to give you a great window as to what students are experiencing. So without further ado, let us get started. I want to give each of them an opportunity to introduce themselves to you so you get a sense of who they are and to put some names to faces here. So why don't we start with Brandon Miller. Brandon, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm studying for the bar exam, so it's a riveting Friday here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like you're in the middle of the bar, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm just, I don't usually wear glasses, but my eyes have been like failing lately. So that's one part of law school. You'll probably need glasses by the end of it.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you come from? What was your undergrad? What did your major in? And then where are you in terms of the law school process?
I'm from Modesto, California, which is like Central Valley area, born and raised. Went to UC Davis for undergrad, did poli-sci and then an international relations double major. Ended up at Ohio State University, so very far away, and not kind of out of my comfort zone at first, but really happy that I ended up here. I've just graduated, like I mentioned. I'm studying for the bar right now, and I think my law school experience is probably going to be a little different from everyone who's going to go to law school, because all of mine was in person except for the last month of instruction, which really wasn't instruction because everyone was figuring out what to do. But overall, I still think some of the themes of law school, whether it's online or in person, are going to stay the same. But that's a little bit about my background.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. So let's move over to Zach, Zach Nemirovksy. He is a 2L, so let's hear from his perspective.
Hi, yeah, I'm Zach. So I am also native to California, Bay Area. I went to UC Davis at first for just physics. Then I started enjoying philosophy classes, so I double majored with that. And I'm currently going to Santa Clara Law School, currently a 2L. Similar to what Brandon mentioned, the experience at law school I find is different now online than it was my very first semester in person. So I can speak a little bit to that transition, and also I anticipate hopefully it'll be in person soon enough.
Yeah, hopefully we'll all return to normal, and a lot of the things we talked about today will have some evergreen nature to them. So fingers crossed on that front. All right, let's hear from Kameron Adams now.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kameron Adams. I am from the Sacramento Valley. I went to Sacramento State and I was a political science major with a biology minor. I am a 1L at University of Iowa, and I'm actually a JD MHA dual degree. So if anybody has any questions on that, you can shoot me an email, give it to Professor Coons. And we are actually one of the few law schools right now that are in person. So that was a good transition for me, coming from undergrad straight to law school. I didn't have to deal with the online stuff, but I know a lot of people are online, so it's just something we have to deal with now.
Yeah, for sure. It's a weird time to be alive. Okay, so what I want to do now is let's start from the undergraduate experience, and then let's move forward from there. So one thing that I think students would pick out from the very get-go is that your undergraduate experiences come from multiple different perspectives. So we're hearing things that are both STEM fields, physics, and then a biology minor that's thrown in there. And then we're hearing about things like philosophy, political science, the more social sciences, humanities. Talk to me about your perspectives on that. One of the things that I talk to students about is that there's no particular major a person really needs to go to law school. But what's your insight as to the things that you major in, the classes you take as an undergraduate? How did you feel undergrad prepared you for those perspectives? And since we started with Brandon, why don't we start with Kameron and we'll go the other direction now.
Yeah, so I'd say it goes both ways. So The science minor helped me. We just had our first midterm yesterday. So the science minor helped me in the fact that I'm able to go step by step and explain things, which seems to be what we need to do for law school exams, which we didn't really have to do that in my social science background. But my social science background also introduced me to a lot of the terms we use in law school through constitutional law, other undergrad law courses, which I feel like, based on my classmates that were just STEM majors, that was like a whole new language they had to learn. So I think there's benefits to taking either route, really.
Great. Zach, what about your insights? You had a double major, so you were doing kind of two sides of your brain there, physics and philosophy. Did you feel like any particular aspect of both prepared you for law school, or was it mostly just the critical thinking nature of it?
Yeah, speaking first to philosophy, that one in particular really prepared me for the logical writing that goes into it. A big difference between any of the English classes that I've taken, and so I don't know how much this overlaps with poli-sci, but in philosophy, we already did argumentative writing, and that is the kind of writing that you are going to do in law school. You're going to take a position and argue one direction or the other and support it, rather than the analytical style of writing that you would do in English classes. So that definitely helped prepare me for that aspect of it. Physics, I have to say, has been both helpful and unhelpful in the law school experience. And what I mean by that is it was definitely unhelpful in the sense that physics classes certainly moved my GPA lower than it would otherwise be, which is a difficulty in applying. Cameron, I don't know how your experience with bio classes were, but getting higher grades, required a different level of studying in those classes. But on the other hand, the critical thinking skills that physics prepared me for make it very easy to put together, simple things that I've seen some classmates of mine struggle with, and some have no issue, but damages in tort classes. Everyone's very scared of damages, and I'm like, it seems like basic multiplication to me. So there's definitely some pros and cons to that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should flag that. One of the things I talk about in another video with students is the importance of balancing that GPA. You do want to major in the thing that you care about, but you also want to be able to know that you're getting the good grades that you need to be able to get in. And I recall from my own perspective as an English major and a philosophy minor, I had to fulfill at least one hard science requirement. So I took chemistry, and it's one of 2 C minuses that I've got in my entire life. And that I was grateful for that C minus because I worked my tail off for that class. So it's something to think about. It's really important to flag that. By the way, the other C minus was my ethics course in law school. So I don't know what that says about me as a person, but it's worth thinking about. Brandon, you are a classic political science major, and now you're doing both law and then you're also doing public policy. So how do you feel that the social sciences prepared you for that direction?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm kind of the classic bread and butter of what you expect in law school, where it's like English or history, but altogether, I like what everyone has said. I mean, whether you're a teacher or a chem major, we actually see like a lot of students who come from those backgrounds are sometimes the best law students. I just think going into law school, it's really going in with the not only open mind, but the understanding of the way you view the world gets rewired. You're learning a new way of learning and analysis. And I remember you mentioned too, Adam, before, you're like, the summer before law school, like, don't try and like read all these supplements so you know torts really well. Like, just enjoy it. You'll learn everything you need to know in law school, which was completely true through and through. But for my poli-sci and international relations background, like, it helped out in classes like legislation or environmental law or con law. But altogether, I think if you're going to a great institution, an undergrad, and you worked hard, you're going to succeed in law school if that's what you want to do, kind of for the long run.
That's a great point to bring out, Brandon, which is that really what we're talking about here in law school preparation is developing the skills, the work ethic, the reading comprehension, the critical thinking, getting used to thinking at a higher level, because you can learn the terms and the different doctrines when you get to law school. You're going to learn that on the fly anyway. It's really about being prepared to be the kind of person that's going to be successful in law school as opposed to the specific content. So let's move forward in terms of not just your undergraduate experience and your major, but talk to us about why you chose law school. What, of all the considerations that you could go into, each of you had majors that had multiple different career options. You could have gone different directions with your life. Why did you choose law school, and what considerations went into that decision? Let's go with Zach on this one.
Yeah, so when I began undergrad, I had the idea of doing physics as a career and, possibly engineering as well. So I had an applied physics major technically, so I took some electrical engineering courses. And I really did enjoy that, and I enjoyed everything I was learning. What I realized was in junior year in UC Davis, they thankfully make you take a laboratory course where you have to do research, because if you're going to go into physics, you have to do research. And I learned that I did not like doing research. I enjoyed learning about the topic, learning about the different inventions and the theories, didn't like doing the research. And in any physics PhD program, a bulk of your work would end up being research if that's what you want to do. And I did want to do some sort of higher learning. So in junior year, I began scrambling, realizing that what I wanted to do, while interesting to me, was not what I wanted to do with my life. So that led into thinking of, what else I could do. I briefly considered a philosophy PhD program, and then realized that there's less to do with that in a sort of feeding yourself kind of way. I know, Adam, you did a PhD in poli-sci. Academia is tough in its own way. And then I was at a family gathering and someone said, well, why don't you do, intellectual property law? It'll let you keep using your physics background while doing something completely different, requiring very little research. So I did an internship briefly for 2 months my summer junior year to make sure that I liked it, because I do not recommend getting involved in law school unless you think you might like law, because it is a bear. And I did enjoy it. So now that's kind of the path I'm taking. I'm looking into patent litigation or copyright litigation, which kind of lets me do the subject matter, the technology that I enjoy, while also doing the substantive work that I enjoy, which is writing and arguing.
That's great. Yeah, in terms of those STEM backgrounds, oftentimes that's the best way. And I believe in order to sit for the patent bar, you have to have a certain amount of knowledge about these more technical things. So if you do plan to chart a course in those fields, a STEM background really is helpful. Brandon, why don't we talk about your experience? What made you choose? You and I met many times in undergraduate as your TA to talk about the direction you wanted your career to go. What were some of the considerations that you had?
I think for me, at least, I went to law school for the reasons you shouldn't go, where I was like, I'm kind of young and I don't know what to do with my life. And I don't want to I could get a master's or I could get a law degree. That didn't work out actually for my roommate. He did that too. He ended up dropping out after his first year. It worked out for me. And I don't say that to discourage anyone, but I think Zach made a really good point. You go to law school to practice law. You don't go into politics. You don't go to do other things. Yes, a JD opens up opportunities to go other places, especially now, dual degrees are so common. I got my master's of public policy and management at no cost. They're just go to 8 classes throughout your second and third year and we'll give you a master's. I probably won't practice law for the rest of my life. So I kind of got that as a buffer if I want to move into other work. But yeah, I really didn't go for the right reasons. My considerations were money. My family grew up in poverty and we always struggled with money. So I wanted to be in a profession to where I didn't have to worry as much about that. But also Ohio State gave me a good scholarship. I didn't want to do a career in the middle, but if you've done a career in the middle or are planning on it before law school, that's a great experience. My roommate is 5 years older than me. She worked at a museum for 2 years and then traveled internationally for 2 years. Top of her class, absolutely brilliant student, great writer. So whether you go straight through or you kind of take that break in between, I think if you want to be in law school and you want to practice law, you're going to succeed at least.
Yeah, it's a great thing to bring out that, my experience was similar to yours, Brandon, in that, I have an English degree and I floated the idea of getting a PhD in English at one time because I really loved literary criticism, but I felt very discouraged from doing that for the same reasons that Zach points out, which is that the academic market is very challenging. So I went to law school thinking that that was the route that I wanted to go. And you find out pretty quickly that law school is really just about preparing you to be a lawyer and to practice law, right? And which you that would think would be obvious, but too many times students have that misconception. Kameron, why don't we hear from you? After your political science background, what made you decide to go to law school?
Well, initially, I was just going to be a bio major, and I thought what I wanted to do was medicine. I have a lot of family members that are in the healthcare side of things. So I knew that I had an interest in health and medicine, and then I went and shadowed a few doctors, and that was when I realized I can't handle blood. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to figure something out. So I was able to shadow the council at UC Davis Hospital. And that was where I learned that I can have an impact on the healthcare side of things while practicing law. And I also realized that I actually liked the law. I didn't think that that was going to be one of my interests initially, but as I worked with them more and saw what they were able to do, they really have a big impact on things. And that was what drove me to law. So I hope to practice health law when it's all said and done.
That's a good thing to bring out too, which is that, you know, practice comes in many different forms, as these series of videos are trying to highlight for students, which is that you can be a lawyer in many different capacities. You're still practicing, and so it's really important to emphasize that fact that Brandon brought out. But your subject matter might overlap with your own personal interests and professional interests that you might have had before choosing law school. So you can chart your career in whatever way you want to, with the understanding that law school is strictly about preparation for law. Okay, so why don't we talk about the sequence in terms of law school? Let's start with your experiences in first year. And I realize, Kameron, you're kind of getting your toe wet in a lot of this, so you may not have some insights about the actual process of first year, but perhaps you can give us your ideas as to the first few weeks that you've had. So let's actually start with Brandon on this one. So Brandon, talk to us about the first year experience, especially as it relates to those other years now that you've graduated. What is first year like? Oftentimes it's portrayed as, you know, it is the grueling year. It's the year that really counts in a lot of ways. So what was your experience like?
Yeah, it was brutal. Like, just to put it, like, I mean, to be completely frank about it, but like, it was really tough in terms of just like, it was in undergrad. It's like I could study a week before the exam and do totally fine. And then when I tried that for the midterm, I'm like, oh no, this isn't gonna work. It's really tough. And you just kind of have to learn the way to take exams, because there's a way in particular. Going through, I think fall semester of 2L is actually the most difficult, because you're like, you're doing OCIs, you're doing journal, it's just a whole bunch of stuff. Third year is a breeze. You really just do a lot of clinical classes. I had a couple clients. I did like advanced legal writing, stuff like that. But I think the first year is really, really important in terms of like the bread and butter of kind of the law. The reason they start you off with that is because generally to learn any other subject, whether it be employment or environmental law, you're going to need constitutional law, you're going to need torts and stuff like that. And the irony is, like, me studying for the bar exam right now, like I am relearning everything in 1L, but in 8 weeks. So like I'm in Civ Pro again, I'm doing contracts, I'm doing property and all that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of options in law school, like what classes you can take, though it depends on which school you go to. But the first year classes vary a little bit. Sometimes they'll do property first semester or second semester. It doesn't really matter, but work as hard as you can, and as tough as it may be, just try and do everything to make that first year your best year, because it makes the rest of law school a lot easier.
Yeah, Zach, why don't we get your insights on this, because you are fresh out of the 1L experience. You're just starting your 2L year. Why is the first year so challenging? Can you talk to us about, I mean, Brandon mentioned that, you know, you're taking all the classic courses that would prepare you for the bar and for preparing you other forms of practice, but in terms of the lifestyle and what you can expect in 1L, why is it so challenging, or was it challenging for you?
So echoing what Brandon said at one point as an offhand comment, I actually think fall semester of 2L, what I'm in right now, is more challenging than 1L was. And I sincerely hope it gets easier in 3L because I'm doing so much right now. And in 1L year, I wasn't doing nearly as much. Nonetheless, it still felt hard at the time. And I think that's because it's really laying a foundation that you don't have yet. You're trying to figure out how to learn. Some people adjust quicker than others. I know people who did very well on finals in fall and they had bombed the midterm. And for them, what it was particularly one of my friends, he went into the midterm studying exactly like he had studied beforehand for English. I think he's an English major, and it did not work for him. And by the time finals came around, he turned his study method around, and he aced our final. So that was excellent. And one good thing about fall 1L is that midterms are worth some portion of your grade, but in law school, and you may have this already, or you may find it there, it is not uncommon for the final to be worth 80% or more of your grade, you know? So try hard and experiment with things up until the midterm, because that is your first big test of, have you managed to learn things? Have you managed to figure out a study habit that works for you? And it's really important in setting the pace. As Brandon said, if you end up doing well fall 1L year, it'll make it easier to find your 1L summer positions, which are important for networking later. It'll make it easier to get on journals or other things. So it's hard in 1L year because of, I think, the stress that is attached to it. It's such an important pace setter that it really feels like it is going to dictate parts of your law school experience later, despite the fact that it'll be more difficult as far as how much you're doing in your 2L year.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to bring out. The reason why 1L is so challenging is because that really forms the basis for the rest of your experience. And we're going to talk in a minute about the on-campus job interview process. And for a lot of firms and a lot of places that are kind of the traditional route that a person would go, your 1L grades are really what is dictating how well you do in that process. So it can be very, very stressful, and it feels like a lot is riding on the examination process. In another video, I talk a little bit more about what that looks like in detail, but it's really good to hear from both of you on that front. Now, Kameron, you're in a unique position because you're just starting out. So as someone that's just beginning, what insights do you have for undergraduates that are preparing for law school, and what can they expect in those first few weeks of adjusting to that first year experience?
So the biggest adjustment for me was that on day one, there's no like syllabus day. They don't give you time to explain things. I got sent a email from each of my professors saying what pages need to be read for the first day, and we just jumped right in. So I heard that that's how law school was, but that was a lot for me. I was expecting, oh, we'll have a week, I'll get to ease into things. Not the case at all. The other thing that was weird for me was we just had our first midterm, which I'm glad we had, because like they mentioned, it was, I think it's only 15% of our grade, and the final is 85%. But that was nice because I've never seen a law school exam, and it's a lot different than any of the other exams I've taken. So that was nice for something to get used to. But other than that, it is just really time consuming. The amount of reading, it's a lot, what you'd expect going into law school. But when I actually got it, it was overwhelming at first. I'm finally starting to get the hang of things, realizing how to read it, how to brief quicker. And other than that, everybody says to find the balance, give yourself time to have fun, do this, do that. I haven't been able to figure that out yet. I'm hoping I will, but so far it's busy to say the least. Not as hard as I thought it'd be. Everybody seems to understand the material. It's just a lot, and you have to know how to apply it.
That's a good thing to bring out here too, which is that, you know, from a purely general perspective, the law is not a challenging subject. It really isn't. It's not, you know, higher level thinking in terms of analyzing philosophical concepts or dealing with data analysis, anything like that. There are much harder fields to go into, but it's challenging in that it is requiring you to handle, it's basically requiring you to juggle a lot of things in the air at the same time, and having to really conceptualize how these doctrines and holdings fit together, and then how you can use them for a client. And so, as Kameron points out, that requires some retraining of the brain. Let's talk about law school exams. 1L is notorious for being 100% law school exams. Every class you take is all about exams. And then by the time you get to, second year, or definitely a third year, those exams might drop off and you're focused more on projects or papers, things like that. But let's talk about the exam experience. How do you guys prepare for taking exams? What tips did you have for going into the exams? Talk to us about what an outline is. Let's do Zach first on this, because he's just coming out of the 1L experience. Then I'm going to go to Brandon, and then we'll go to Kameron. So Zach, give us your insight on that.
Yeah, so part of it is I've seen people prepare for exams in different ways. I should explain what an outline is, because I'm about to use that word 3 or 4 times. So an outline is a repository of all the knowledge you have been taught in a semester at either a high level or a low level, depending on how you've made yours. Some people's are bullet point lists of every topic they went over. Other people's, I've seen my friends copy and paste portions of the online textbook, and study from it. And everyone uses their outline in a different way, but basically it's meant to be a quick reference guide, either for your studying or for other purposes of what did you learn, what was in the course, and what's important. Helps you get the big picture. My outline is always handwritten. It is a nested bullet point list going Roman numeral and then numbers and then letters of the topics we've covered and brief legal statements under them. And I have found that method to work for me because I barely study my outlines after writing it, but the act of writing out an outline, which for me ends up being 5 or 6 pages at least, is what teaches me the law right before the exam when I need it, because that's how I retain information. You will retain information differently. And some people I have seen who don't make outlines, some of them do well, some of them don't. It really depends on how you retain information. An outline, I think, is one of the most common tools and possibly the best tool for doing it because it's so personalizable. Some people study from their outlines. Some people like me just write them out. And really, you can do what helps you. It's a method of organizing what you learned. As for the exam itself, there's, as Kameron mentioned a couple times, there's a very particular style of law school exams. They will teach you some variation of issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion, which is kind of just what they want you to go through. And it's always, they are presenting something for you. You give the rule about it, you analyze the facts under it, and you give your conclusion. And the points are only partly allocated for being right, partly for the analysis you've given, because so often the answer is it depends. And I think that's most of what I have to say. It really is putting the work in for law school exams. In that way, if any of you do STEM, it's less scary than a STEM exam. On a physics exam, it's possible for me to simply not know something. On a law school exam, generally, if I've studied, I will know it.
Yeah, the real challenge of a law school exam is, fighting that urge to feel like, well, there's got to be a correct answer, and that's what we're trained to do as undergraduates, is knowing the answer to a thing. But in reality, the answer that we're really trying to give is that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm educated in my argument, and then I can make a compelling argument, make a compelling case. So Brandon, you've now gone through this for 3 years. What's your insight on the exam experience, especially the process? In 1L, you're taking 4 to 5 exams. They can be 3 hours long each. It's a marathon sprint at the last 2 weeks of the semester. Talk to us about your experience over those 3 years. How'd you do in the first year with exams? What tips do you have?
Yeah, I think it varies so much though, because each professor will be different. Each class will be different. It's like my con law exam was an 8-hour exam, which was just horrible. But then I had a legislation exam, which was 5 hours. Crim was 3. Torts was 1. So like I didn't actually, all of my exams in law school were open book. Because like everyone there is smart. Everyone knows the doctrine. Everyone knows everything. Like I didn't use my outline once during my torts exam because I was like, I just have to go. I have an hour. That's it. But some exams like property and contracts where I had a little bit more time, I like to do binders and I tab them all. So if it's like a statute frauds issue, which you'll learn in contracts, I had it tabbed and I just went there and I pre-wrote all of my exams. And when I say pre-wrote all of my exams, like I would literally have paragraphs and paragraphs of potential analyses, the rule statement. So I would just be on the property exam typing and looking on my computer. Some exams, they let you have open files. Others, you have to have like an actual paper outline. So it really is completely different. When you get to 3L, exams are just hilarious because they don't, it's like one was a trial. Everyone's passing for my civil law clinic. For my arbitration seminar, it was a paper on whatever arbitration topic we wanted to do. I don't mean them as a joke, like you still have to put in a lot of work, but compared to 1L, it's just not comparable at all. But yeah, for me, it was pre-writing exams. I like to do note cards. I would split up an outline between a black letter outline and then a black letter law outline and then a normal outline. So my normal outline was like 50 pages and it was pretty much all my notes from the class. My black letter was just the rule statements, the really nitty gritty. And then I'd have a 1-page cheat sheet with just all of the issues, because if you can't spot the issues, you're not going to pass the exam and you're not going to be able to do any analysis if you're not spotting the issues. So like for evidence, I would put all the evidence rules on just one piece of paper. But I mean, first year I was lucky to do well. My worst grade ever was crim law because it was a closed book exam. But altogether, I think, yeah, just kind of putting in that work and finding what works for you. I kind of did trial and error like everyone does. How you worked in undergrad might work for law school. You might have to revamp or retool it, but you just have to see what works for you. And each class and professor, though they might have like the same common theme of how you write an exam, they're all going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a good thing to bring out here, which is that you mentioned that you hardly even looked at your outlines. That was a phenomenon that I saw with myself in law school. The action of creating the outline really is where you're retaining the information. It's a good study tip to try to assimilate all this information, synthesize concepts, and have it all on paper. And that act of typing it or handwriting it really translates information. So that by the time you're taking the exam, you find that, well, I already know this because I've gone through it.
Yeah. And one quick point too, actually, even for like the bar exam, which I'm studying for right now, as I mentioned, like I'm pre-writing answers and outlining, even though it's a closed book exam. Because for me, like you said, it's how I retain the information, just keep repeating until I don't need a pre-written answer or an outline.
Yeah. So Kameron, you're starting out this process, looking, down the road at your exams. What are some things that you're doing here at the front end that you would recommend for students as they start coming into this process?
Well, what I've been told and by other students, active lawyers, is to start outlining early. You don't want to set it all on the back end because everybody will know the rules by exam time. You need to know how to apply them. So you want to outline early so that you can have the rules down. Practice exams, at least at University of Iowa, all the professors for 1L will issue their old exams on this site that we have, and you can do practice exams. And all of our exams are open note because the idea is that, like I said, everybody knows the rules. You're graded on the application of the analysis. And you can go either way. I just had my first midterm. And it was like that. There was no right or wrong. We actually had to present both sides' argument in their analysis. So I think I did well. We'll see. We'll see if my outlining works so far, but I'm not sure.
Great. This is a very small question, and maybe I'll take a volunteer or two on this question. You can just raise your hand and let me know who wants to answer this. But in terms of the grading, you hear about law school grading on the curve, and undergraduates sometimes aren't familiar with that concept. Is they think grading on the curve is, well, professor drops a whole bunch of points and now I'm doing better than what I normally am. But what's your experience in terms of curve grading in exams in law school? What does that mean? for a student? Who would like to address that question? Brandon, go ahead and do that.
I may just mention that because I can think of two. Like first for Ohio State, every school's similar but kind of different. Where 30% of the class gets A's, 60% gets B's, 10% gets C's. That's just what the curve is, plus or minus a percent up to professor's discretion. But second and third year classes, the curve is the makeup of the class's numerical average. So like for us, numerical average matters. So let's say you have a 91.2 numerical average. That means that there's going to be an A available in the class. So like for my employment law class, there were 54 of us. The professor was allowed to give out 11 A's. And I got an 89, and she's like, I couldn't give out any more. So the curve is difficult, but like there's some classes like seminars, well, they're going to allow like 70% A's. All schools do it a little bit differently, but yeah, they're not going to drop off points because no one's going to get 100% on the exam. So it is a curve in that sense, but there are pretty set parameters to how much, how many good and bad and normal grades they can get.
Zach, do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, as Brandon mentioned, it depends how your school grades, but the general gist is the same at Santa Clara: 10 to 12% A's, 80% B's, the remainder C's. And for us, part of it, which I think Brandon touched on, but I want to make explicit, is my professors, at least, they will grade your exams and your assignments, your briefs, raw, as if it's a normal grade. And at the end of the class, they apply the curve based on how many they're allowed to give out. So regardless of how well you do, if you're not in the top 12% for me, you're not getting an A, you know? And so one time, and this did not happen to me, thankfully, but it was a midterm in 1L spring. A friend of mine was in this class. No one got above a 60%. And there were a lot of issues with administration about why that exam was so bad, because it was an outlier exam to everything else all of us had taken. But even in that class, my friend who got a 58% got an A because he was one of the top grades. Meanwhile, you know, in other classes, I've done very well and gotten an A as I expected. And in one class, I actually got a 92% and was expecting an A and found myself with a B+. Just because, as Brandon said, sometimes the professor's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't give out more A's than this. So yeah, that's what grading on a curve is.
One of the big ironies of law school with these grading schemes is that technically everybody in the room could be saying the wrong thing. Technically, everyone in the room could be an idiot about this doctrine, but as long as you're the least idiot, you're getting the A, which is really ironic. So why don't we talk a little bit about the on-campus interview process, getting internships, those summer experiences, things like that. I want to hear your insights on those, on that process. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this because I've got 3 questions I really want to hammer before we wrap up. But talk to us about your on-campus interview experiences, preparing, networking, getting yourself ready for a first year summer experience. Brandon, why don't we go with you first on this one?
Okay, yeah. So for my first summer, I was at the Department of Homeland Security. I was in 2 offices there in DC, which was a really cool experience. I got that because one of our professors is very well known in DC and he runs a DC program. So if your school offers programs like that, take advantage of it. For OCIs, it's a little different when you go out of state and then you want to go back to your home state like I did. So I didn't have traditional OCIs, but like I mentioned, I didn't have anyone in my family who was a lawyer. I talked to everyone I know who was a lawyer. I contacted Adam about it, just say, hey, do you know anyone, any firms, anything just in particular? So I ended up getting a couple interviews. I flew back to California and I got a firm job there over the summer and then was fortunate enough to have a firm job after graduation too. So it kind of sets you up nicely where 2L year, you know where you're going to be after graduation, which is very far in the future. But yeah, so OCIs, especially if you're out of state, in state, sometimes if you're at a giant, massive firm like Jones Day or something, you could go from Illinois to California. But I bet Zach probably has a better idea of what it's like doing OCIs in the state where your law school is.
Great. Zach, why don't you give us your insight on that? Because you're right in the midst of all this. And
Well, so COVID has actually been a big change because of this. So one thing that Brandon's very right about is you can totally go to a different state from where you're going in law school, but it's going to require some finagling. Part of the reason I chose Santa Clara over other schools is because I want to practice in intellectual property in Silicon Valley. So that was important for me as far as location goes, but I haven't done OCIs yet because with COVID, our school did a pass no pass grading for spring because of the sudden switch in everything. And between all of us, I did very well, and I'm mad that it shows up as passes on my transcript, but that's a story for another time. What that meant was the school decided that firms want another semester of grades to go off of. So they're grading this fall on the ordinary curve, and OCIs have been pushed to January 13th to 15th, in part in the hope that they will be also in person. So I get to look forward to using my winter break to prepare for that and doing OCIs there. But as far as networking goes, a lot of what Brandon mentioned, reaching out to alums of your law school is important, or just people who you know, because a lot of it is figuring out, what you want to do and what kind of a firm or company you want to be at so that you can apply.
Great. Kameron, are there any things that you're thinking about right now as a brand new 1L with that thought process in mind? Obviously, you're thinking about health-related practice. Are there any things that you're thinking about right now in terms of your preparation?
Well, actually, like how Zach mentioned, Iowa did the pass-fail thing last semester also. So we're doing our OCIs later, as he said. So this year it's weird because 1Ls will actually have a chance to participate because we will have a semester worth of grades. A lot of the 2Ls are upset about that. But they said that the priority will still be given to 2Ls. But I will be preparing for that over winter, as Zach said also. But other than that, we have alumni that are pretty much all over the country. And it was a surprise to me. Everybody is always willing to talk to you, willing to become a connection. Seems like all the alumni are open to helping. So that was a big surprise for me because I want to practice in California and not in the Midwest. So it was helpful to me to learn that there were a lot of connections out here.
That's great. So now I've got what I would say are the three questions that I think it would be on any law or potential law student's mind. And let me start with the one that maybe is the most obvious. How do you guys deal with the stress of law school? How do you balance the different feelings that you're having at any given moment? What are some tips that you can give to pre-law students that how they might face some of these things? So Zach, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, so I'd say the number one biggest thing is camaraderie has been very important. There are two pieces to that. The first is I've got all sorts of people in my life who support me, like, family and other friends I had before law school, none of whom really understand what law school is like. And because of that, one thing that has been very important for me was I made a couple of very close friends in law school. And, small things like doing lunch on a Wednesday despite having homework, and then just talking about what's going on in the classes to kind of vent has been very important to let out the stress. And other than that, I'd say that the number one biggest thing has been to find a way to make time in your life for things that aren't law school as well. So in particular, I can speak to that right now in my 2L year. I'm doing an insane amount of things. I almost did too many things. I was signed up to also TA Crim because I did very well in that class. And 3 weeks before I had to actually say whether I was doing it or not, I told the professor I actually can't because I realized I'm doing a part-time externship in a district court. I'm taking 3 classes. I'm on a journal, and you will be doing a lot. Nonetheless, I make sure to leave my Sundays open so that every other Sunday I can get together with friends and play Dungeons and Dragons, So no matter how much you're working, try to find some sort of time that you set aside to not do law school. And that goes a long way.
I'm really glad you brought out the camaraderie piece of this, which is a crucial thing to keep in mind going into it. Sometimes students think, all right, I got to slash and burn when I go in there. and it's just this horribly competitive atmosphere. And what you'll find is that that's a recipe for a lot of heartache. There were two friends that I made a connection with very early on in law school. First semester, we studied together, we made outlines together, and they are two individuals that I still keep in contact with. In fact, we just met over Zoom 2 days ago to touch base and get together at a regular basis. We try to see each other every year. And those are friendships that are born out of a lot of stress and a lot of crisis that are going to be timeless friendships. So really good that you bring that out, Zach. Kameron, how are you handling the stress as a brand new 1L? What are some tips that you have?
Well, I also try and take at least one day off a week, but on the days that I don't take off, I realize that I am probably doing too much. I need to try and find some more time for myself those days, but so far I'm still trying to find that balance. Other than that, I find myself talking to my family a lot more than I used to because it's like a comfort thing. When I'm stressed out, it's easy for me to talk to them. But as Zach mentioned, they don't understand what it is that we're going through. And I read that in books coming in, and that is real. Like, I try and talk to them, and my friends will just be like, oh, like, you'll be fine. You did good in undergrad and all this stuff. But it's different. So I did find some law school friends. We're lucky enough here that we have a law school housing. And everybody here knows the struggle, knows what we're going through. So we try and play basketball. Now that football's on, we can watch football. Other than that, being able to study with other people, it kind of unclouds my brain. Sometimes I find myself just reading the same sentence over and over and over. So having other people to like talk it out with is definitely a big help.
Brandon, what about you? You're all the way done studying for the bar. How do you deal with the stress of law school?
Yeah, I think they've all brought up really good points. Like my group of friends, I will, even though I'm moving back to California, I will have them for the rest of my life. It was great going to Ohio State because I had one of the best football programs in the country. So we'd go to games, all the law students sit together in their section. I was kind of pre-COVID, so we had things like bar review where all the law students go out to a bar on Thursday night. We had like law prom, barrister's ball and stuff like that. But even though you guys might not have that or have them in a different way going forward, I'd say one thing with dealing with stress, yes, keep kind of in contact with your core group, whether it be from home. I would Zoom or call my friends from California pretty often, have a core group here from law students. Law schools usually have intramural leagues for soccer or baseball or basketball. I would say one thing is always be mindful of your mental health. I think in our profession in particular, it is very stigmatized because when you get to applying to be an attorney and stuff, character and fitness comes about and they ask you questions about your mental health. And sometimes law students are fearful to disclose stuff, but like I went through a lot of mental health problems, especially because of law school, which I don't mean to say to deter you, but like Ohio State offered a lot of resources, whether it's an in-house psychologist or a therapist or just having resources to deal with mental health issues, because you will be more stressed than you have ever been in your life. But I like to describe law school as having my highest highs and my lowest lows, completely worth it in the end. But dealing with stress not only affects kind of your emotional well-being, but it affects your personal relationships and your performance in school. So going into that, I think you really have to put a strong emphasis on making sure that you're taken care of before reading a chapter about Civ Pro or something like that.
It's a good thing to emphasize. One thing that I did not fully prepare for when I was in law school was the mental health challenges. And it wasn't until much later, actually, when I left my firm, when I really started to double down on my efforts. And I wish I would have accessed, therapy options much, much earlier in the process. Let's actually combine these, since we're running low on time, but let's combine these last two questions because I think they touch on the same thing. And that is, give me something that you wish you would have known before you had applied to law school, or tips that you would give to someone who is a rising undergraduate who's thinking about law school. Are there any things that if you could go back in time, that you wish you could say, all right, think about this thing? Let's actually start with Kameron, since he's right at the beginning, and we'll go through Zach and then Brandon.
I would say make sure you want to be here as best as you can. I know not everybody has the opportunity to shadow somebody or intern at a law firm, but a lot of people are already starting to think that this isn't what they want to do, and I feel like it's really early for that and a waste of their money. Another thing with the application process, which somebody told me that went through it the year before me, which was a big help and I had no idea about. When you're applying, you have leverage in the sense that you can negotiate with these schools how much money they're going to give you. If you don't have the means to go visit, that you can tell them that if you can't go visit, then you want to cross them off your list. They will help you get there. They will give you a stipend, give you a plane ticket. They want to help you. These are still people, even though it seems like a scary process, they're still just people on the other side, and they're a lot nicer than I thought they would be when I went through the whole process.
Great. Thanks, Cameron. Zach, how about you?
Yeah, everything that Cameron said is definitely, I think, something that bears keeping in mind. In particular, for me, I think one thing that I had wished I'd known would have been how the summer before law school, you really can't prepare for law school and to just make the most of it. And so I partially managed to do that because I had a lot of fun with my family, but I spent probably a total of a month of the summer before law school stressing out about 1L, and none of it really changed anything. My initial way that I was studying still had to be changed anyway. About 4 weeks into the semester, I still did well at the end of it once I'd figured it out. So enjoy your time pre-law school. Make sure you want to be in law school. And when you're in it, make the most of it. I mean, there's tons of events, more events than you can possibly go to, and I sometimes feel the pressure to go to a bunch of events that my friends are at, but if it's not interesting, you don't have to go. And if it is interesting, make the time to go. So little things like that, I think, will help you enjoy your experience a lot.
That's great. It's funny you should mention that, Zach, because I did the same thing you did. I didn't follow my own advice that I now give undergraduates. I tried to make my summer, and actually I took a year between. I tried to make that year the year that I read a bunch of Horn books, right? About a bunch of essentials editions and so forth. And it was utterly wasted. There was no reason for me to have done any of that. Brandon, how about you? You're at the very end. What are some things that you wish you would have known, or tips that you'd give to undergraduates?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's things that I might have changed or done a little bit different, but I'm happy with where I am. But I would say, and I hope everyone watching this video now understands, but I don't think I really had a grasp on how rigorous it would be, coming from a family that's never gone to college or anything like that. I was just walking in like, let's go, people, and it ended up hitting me very hard in the head, where it really knocked me out at first, and kind of the rigor, just really to understand, the next 3 years are going to be probably the most difficult of your life. And I don't say that to deter anyone. It's also the most rewarding. And advice for someone about debating law school, I always push for people to go out of state if they can. I totally understand if people want to stay in state, but I think going out of state, especially the Midwest, since there's two Midwesterners here, it not only gives you a better understanding of our country, but of different people, different food, just different ways of living. I landed in Ohio, and the first month I was like, I've ruined my life. Why did I do this? Looking back on it now, best decision I've ever made in my life. And even though I'm going back to California, there's Buckeyes and Ohio State people everywhere. And just like Cameron mentioned too, he's at Iowa, and there's people all around the country, alumni or whatnot. And I just think it gives a really good kind of opportunity for networking and branching out.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. This was an excellent conversation. And to the students that are watching this, if you have questions for these gentlemen, if you have specific questions for them about their law school experience, I'm happy to field those. You can always email me and I will pass those along to them. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And good luck in all of your professions. I'm sure you're all going to do exceptionally well. Have a great afternoon.